Hello, I'm Dr. Monica Faulkner with the Child and Family Research Institute located in the School of Social Work at the University of Texas at Austin. This PowerPoint and the accompanying guide are intended to provide you with strategies to develop a community strategy to prevent child maltreatment by first conducting a needs assessment. So I've put together 4 steps for you. Identify and define your community, collect information, compile findings, and plan your intervention. So the goal of a needs assessment is to identify and fill in real gaps. A lot of times programs start and they identify things that need to happen, but those things are already happening in their community. So a needs assessment really helps you figure out where the gaps are and where you can target your efforts. And generally, if you're filling in gaps, the larger community and nonprofits are supportive of that because those resources don't exist there. You also want to use the needs assessment to contribute to a better understanding of child maltreatment in your community. Every community is different and there are unique challenges in every community, and so you really want to understand what the unique needs are in your specific area. Maybe you have a high immigrant population or a high military population, and they might have unique needs that you need to really look at and identify and see if there are gaps there. And then you want to use this needs assessment to create impactful and sustainable programs. Again, if you're just doing something that's already been done, or you're identifying a need that everybody else is trying to fill, then that type of programming isn't necessarily going to be impactful and sustainable because it's already being done and maybe it's not working, and that's the reason why people are constantly coming back to it. So needs assessment should in the end lead you to what your intervention should be and allow you to create something that will be impactful and that the community can really get behind. So the first step is to identify and define your community. Figure out who's going to do this needs assessment. Generally, it's the person who's responding to a request for proposals who ends up doing it, but maybe it's someone else. You don't have to be a researcher to do a needs assessment. You just need somebody who can devote some time to really looking at getting surveys out and compiling the information. If there's a group of people involved, that makes it easier because you can get feedback from each other and you have a wider range of people who can distribute surveys and collect data. You want to define your community. So a lot of funding through DFPS focuses on county level interventions. And oftentimes there's 1 or 2 large cities that have a lot of resources, but if you're defining your community as a county, you have to look outside of those large urban areas too, or metropolitan areas, and look and see what's going on in the rural areas, and make sure that you're defining your community to include those areas as well. And then you want to identify the demographics of your community. You should absolutely know how many children live in your community, how many children are under the age of 5, what the family structure looks like in your community, and the income levels. And so in the guide that accompanies this, I've put in links to Census Bureau data where you can specifically go and look by your county and get those demographics so that you know what you're looking at in terms of your population. And then you want to identify what already exists in your community. Some communities have great referral systems where they already have lists of nonprofits and services, but if you don't, then you need to kind of step back and compile that list and identify specifically what relates to child abuse prevention. So a lot of times services are responding to child maltreatment, but they're not necessarily preventing it. And you really want to identify those efforts that are strictly prevention, and then also everything else that exists too. The second step is to collect information. And what we've done with our guide is we've provided you a stakeholder interview and a community survey. Now, there are many ways to collect information for a needs assessment, and our team has done this through a variety of different research methods. But to keep it simple and to allow you to do it without having to go out and find an external researcher to help you, we've put together these 2 tools, and I think it'll keep it very simple for you. So key stakeholders are really anyone who's involved out in your community, and it's great to just interview those key stakeholders. We've provided a guide for you to go through an interview. You can absolutely customize that guide specifically to any unique populations that you might have in your area. And then we've also provided you a sample of a community survey, which you can, again, adapt to meet the needs of your community. So if you do the key stakeholder interviews first, you might find that a lot of people are pointing to a specific intervention that might work. And then in your survey, you can ask people, hey, do you think this is the best option, or is this the best option? So it's a way to get feedback. And so your key stakeholder interviews in that way can inform your community survey. So after you've collected all your information, you have to figure out what to do with it. And this is the part where I think people get stuck. So you want to take all that data from your stakeholder interviews, and the easiest way to do it is to compile your notes. You don't necessarily have to record those interviews, but look at your notes from each interview and start answering questions that you had in that stakeholder interview, and see if there's some general themes that pop out of you. And more than one person should do that with the stakeholder data to make sure that you've got multiple vantage points and biases in check there. And then the community survey, it's really easy if you've done it on SurveyMonkey or an online tool to just print out the findings of that. You don't need to do any complex statistical analysis here, because really you're just wanting to know in general what people think. And so you can just print that out if you've done it online. If you haven't done it online, compile it in an Excel spreadsheet and produce just charts and tables. And then take it and put it all together in a concise way. A lot of times people will take all the tables from a survey and present every single graph and every single table and every single number to people. But really look at what is the most meaningful, because people get really tired of looking at a lot of graphs. So you want to put it together in a concise way, 2 to 3 pages. And then take that concise 2 to 3 pages and you take it back to a group in your community and ask them for feedback. So you can, if there's already a group that exists, go to them and say, this is what we found. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree? Where do you think we should go from here? So you solicit that feedback. You can do it through town halls, through emails even, but distribute your findings. Don't keep them to yourself. Let people see what you found so that you start to build momentum in your community about how to use this information. And then you step back and you figure out what you're going to do. And you use that feedback people are giving you to develop a plan to go forward and to respond to that request for proposals. So I'm leaving you with this slide, and on the bottom it says we are going to, and that's where you would end this needs assessment process, is figuring out what your community is going to do. So this is a very brief overview. The guide that accompanies it has much more information in detail about what you can do. But I wish you the best of luck, and I hope this was helpful. Thank you.